Hey, how's it going, Warhammer World? This is Obsidian Anubis, and I'm back with another Ninth Age battle report. So this is a report I did a couple weeks ago, so it's been a while since I've been able to get one posted. It's been busy over here. Um, so I just came back from the OFCC tournament, and I had picked up a couple extra boxes of the Feral Orcs. So even though I just been playing Feral Orcs for the past month, I still wasn't quite had them out of my system yet, so I decided I wanted to play one more game with Feral Orcs before I switched to my Empire. And I had just finished up my Feral Auric chariot, which you can see in this picture, and I thought it turned out fantastic, so I really wanted to use it in a battlefield. So we decided to do a 1500 point battle against Saurian Ancients again, and this time instead of Sharnak, since he's the uh, Lord level Feral General, I decided that this army would be led by Saragoth, who is the second in command of Sharnak's horde. So this is Saragoth's horde. So let's go ahead and look at the armies. So my opponent bought 25 Star Warriors with full command. In them is my opponent's general with the Saurian veteran who has fencing blades. Next to that is an engine of the Ancients with a Skink Priest level 2 of Nature. Next to that is a Skink Priest level 1 of Wilderness with a Dispel Scroll. And in front of them is a group of 10 Skinks, another group of 10 Skink Hunters, and behind them 30 Skink Braves with full command and 3 Cayman. And then for me, I brought the double D-Rock with the Slinger, or Web Launcher, excuse me. Next to that is a group of 5 Feral Orc Boar Boys, or yeah, with additional hand weapon. I got them mainly just to help clear chaff because I knew my opponent would probably have a lot of skinks. Next to that, I have a group of 20 Feral Edbashers with full command and the Stabba. They also have the +1 movement banner in that unit. And in that unit, I have 2 characters. I have Saragoth. He's the middle model. He's the same Saragoth model that I use in Sharnak's Horde. He has the Axe of Skill, the Wog, and the Plates of Tuktek. And then in the front right is my Wizard. He's a Feral Shaman. He has the Book of Arcane Power, and he's a level 2 of the Big Gods. Next to that, I have a group of 30 plain Feral Orcs with full command and Stabba. And they actually have my BSB in there, who I forgot to write down. But he has the Mithril Mail and the Relentless icon. Next to that, I have my Feral Chariot over on the flank. And then I have 2 groups of 5 Spider Riders with Tomahawks. They actually aren't placed in this picture. Because the scouts, they got placed later on, and I'll show you a picture of where they get placed before the battle begins. For magic, I had Atom Lads, Oi No Dying, and Get Them. And I had deployed my entire army first on the right-hand side, so my opponent got to deploy in reaction to me, so deployed in the left-hand corner, but that means I got the first turn. So, Saragoth's Horde, turn 1. So this is what the battlefield looked like before we started playing. So in movement phase, I popped the Relentless icon and moved up as quickly as I could, and then my other orcs marched up with the extra movement banner. You can see I moved both of my spiders up to start taking some shots at one of the groups of skink hunters. And then my chariot slowly moved up, but with movement 7 and without being able to march, it's going to be a long call before the chariot can get into combat. In magic phase, I got 8 power dice. I threw, what is it, Atom Lads, the one that you can reroll 1s in close combat, at one of the Spider Riders that was next to my opponent. My opponent let me have it, and then I didn't feel like casting any other spells, so that ended my magic phase. Shooting, I shot my Web Launcher at my opponent's Star Warriors. I had a direct hit, however, with being toughness 4, the Web Launcher didn't do any damage, but it did stick them, so my opponent, if they decide to march or anything, will have to take dangerous terrain. But other than that, that brings us to Saurian Ancient, turn 1. So in movement, my opponent just kind of moved up, as you can see here. Just slowly moved up the Star Warriors as they didn't want to get them killed by the Web Launcher, which I can't blame them. In Magic Phase, my opponent got 5 power dice and threw all 5 at Dwellers Below on my Edbashers. I used my Dispel Scroll to stop it because I didn't want to risk losing a third or fourth of or half my unit to Dwellers Below on the first turn. In shooting phase, my opponent had these Skink Hunters shoot at my spiders which are not in the forest, who do not get the cover save. Luckily for me, my opponent only killed 1, which was a good thing because I accidentally had moved these two units too close together. So if one would have broken, I probably would have failed with both of them, and they both would have ran away. So luckily, my opponent only killed 1, and they didn't have to make a panic test. So that brings us to Saragoth's Horde turn 2. So for movement, I charged one group of Spider Riders out of the forest into the skink hunters and move the other group around to take some shots at the lone wizard. My opponent stand and shot at the spiders that charged into combat and managed to kill off 3. Luckily, I did pass my panic test. And then for other movement, you can see I just moved the rest of my army as quickly as I could to try to get them into combat. In Magic phase, I got 5 power dice, and I rolled 3 of them for Atom Lads on the spiders in close combat, and I got 2 double 6s, so my opponent let me have it, so they got 2 reroll 1s in close combat. However, because I miscast, I took a small round template over my wizard, putting 1 wound on the wizard and blowing up 4 of my Ed Bashers, so not the best trade in the world. In shooting phase, my web launcher once more shot at the Star Swearers, but this time it drifted off and hit nothing. However, my Spider Riders did manage to throw tomahawks and wipe out my opponent's 1 lone skink priest, so that was good. So that brings us to Saurian Ancient, turn 2. So my opponent went ahead and charged the flank of my Spider Riders. I knew they would get it wiped out, but that's okay. They did their job. They killed a wizard. That's pretty good. On the left-hand side, my opponent moved up the skinks and the Star Warriors, kind of using the skinks to chaff up my double D rock so it couldn't charge into the Star Warriors. And then over here on the right-hand side, you can see that my opponent managed to kill 1 of my Spider Riders last turn, and I killed none of my opponent. So I thought my Spider Riders would do better in combat. I was wrong. I was very wrong. But that's okay. It passed its panic test, so it's still there. In Magic phase, my opponent got 6 power dice, and once more they threw, I think, 5 at Dwellers Below. Did not miscast, but I could not stop it. Well, I threw all my dice at it, couldn't stop it. So my opponent did manage to get Dwellers in the Earth off on my Ed Bashers, and that wiped out about half of them. I think it killed about 16 Ed Bashers, plus wiped out the wizard. Luckily for me, my general did pass his save, so he did not get affected, but my wizard died as well as about half my unit. So that definitely hurt. That took this unit out of basically combat other than possibly scouts, and it got rid of my magic phase, which was not good. And to put salt in the wound, my opponent also managed to get healing waters off on the Sars Warriors, so they had a 5-up board save. So just lovely. In close combat, my opponent Stegodon easily wiped out my spiders. I think the impact hits alone wiped them all out. The skinks killed the 1 remaining Spider Rider and just prepared for my incoming horde next turn. So that brings us to Shonok's horde, turn 3. So in charges, I declared a charge from my ferals onto the skink hunters. My opponent elected to flee, so I redirected into the big block of skinks with the Cayman, as they were only an inch or 2 behind the other skinks, and as well as adding my head bashers into combat. I knew they would probably likely die, but hopefully they could do a few wounds before they succumbed to my opponent, as well as I wanted to get my general in combat as well. I also decided to charge my double D rock into my opponent's Stegodon. Oh, I'm sorry, that's wrong. So I did charge my spider into my opponent's Stegodon. I charged both feral groups into my opponent's skinks, who my opponent decided not to flee, because if they fled, then I was going to just overrun or just make the charge into the big block. So they decided to stand and shoot, pick off a couple of my orcs from the stand and shoot. In close combat, I easily wiped them out, overran into my opponent's block of Cayman and skinks. So that's what happened there. Sorry about that. And the spider, I think I put 3 wounds onto my opponent's Stegodon, and it managed to put 2 wounds onto my spider. And then out of this picture, at the bottom of this picture, you can see the hand of one of my boar boys. They had turned so that they can charge the skinks if they wish to try to move around. They're kind of protecting my flank there. So that brings us to Saurian Ancient turn 3. So in movement, you can see that my opponent kind of moved the skinks around to take some shots at my boar boys, as well as moving the Star Swearers to probably flank my spider next turn if it doesn't get out of the way. In Magic phase, my opponent got 8 power dice and threw up healing waters on the... my opponent threw it up on the Star Swearers. I actually let this through because I didn't want them to cast any other spells. However, this did put a wound. This did heal a wound as the lore attribute onto the Stegodon, so it had only taken 2 wounds now. In shooting, my opponent shot at my frenzied feral orcs and wiped out 4 of them, which was somewhat surprising to me, but luckily, being frenzied, my character didn't care about panic, so it was fine. And then in close combat, you can see that my spider is now up to 5 wounds, so I took 3 more wounds. I believe the Stegodon is also up to 5 wounds, so it has 1 wound remaining. I have 3 wounds remaining, so hopefully I can kill it on my next turn before my opponent manages to get the Saurus Warriors in there. If not, then I'm probably going to be a squished spider. In combat with the Skinks, you can see that my opponent put most of their attacks into the Ed Bashers and managed to kill off 4 of them. So I just have my Saragoth, the champion, and the the banner standard barrel in the, or just the unit banner, excuse me, in the Ed Bashers, and most of my other orcs are still, feral orcs are still alive. You can see that I wiped out, I think I took out 12 or 13 of my opponent's skinks. This was an auto break for my opponent. The general was way too far away, so my opponent fled. Me being frenzy, had to give chase and overran and wiped them out. So that was good. Although my Ed Bashers are now seriously depleted. So that brings us to Sharnak's Horde Saragoth's Horde turn 4. So this is where they overran last turn. So on my turn, I just flip them around to possibly flank the Stegodon if it's still there at the end of combat. I failed my frenzy test with my 1 remaining boar, so it charged into the skink hunters who stand in shot and wiped him out. You can see my chariot is slowly making its way over there, so maybe I'll get in combat by the 6th turn if I'm lucky. I didn't have any magic because my wizard was dead, so that took us straight into close combat. And my double D rock did manage to finish off the Stegodon. The spider went first, and I think I managed to get my venomous jaw off this turn and managed to kill the Stegodon. So I turned and faced my opponent as such. So that brings us to Saurian Ancient turn 4. So in movement, my opponent obviously declared a charge with the Saurus Warriors into the front of my double D rock and just kind of moved the skinks to the side. This is actually a picture was taken before, and then my opponent's like, oh wait, I can't shoot because I'm in combat. So I let my opponent reform the skink so that they could shoot at my incoming chariot. In combat, my opponent put 2 wounds onto my spider, so it now has 7 wounds, so it's clinging to its last wound. I killed off, it looks like you can count the number of missing. It looks like I killed off 5, 6, 7 or so. I killed off 7 of my opponents. So luckily, I think I actually won combat because I had done more wounds than my opponent, but luckily I was still alive with 1 wound remaining. So that brings us to turn 5 of Saragoth's Horde. So in turn 5, I charged my large group of feral orcs into the Saurus Warriors. Unfortunately, because of the angle, I could only get like 2 in the combat, but it was something. I decided not to bother with the Ed Bashers. I wanted them to, survive, so I did not want them in anywhere near the combat. So they just kind of are blocked by the other group of ferals. I decided to charge my chariot into the skinks. It, having slightly better armor and toughness, managed to not get shot to death and did make it into combat, although it did take a few wounds as it did charge in. And then after combat, so I killed off 4 of my opponent's Saurus Warriors between the spider and the feral orcs. My opponent unfortunately did manage to kill off my spider just managed to get that 1 last wound. And then my chariot managed to wipe out the skinks. However, it did take 3 wounds in the process. I think all 3 of those were from being standing shot. So my opponent's pretty good at standing and shooting, apparently. I don't know what this picture is showing. I guess it's just a duplicate picture. So that brings us to Saurian Ancient turn 5. So we pretty much go straight to combat. We just kind of align both of our units so that they can get more into the combat. So this is before combat, and then this is after combat. Unfortunately, I am no longer strength 4, so my guys are only strength 3 because they're just regular orcs. I think orcs should be strength 4, toughness 4. But that would probably make them too powerful. But anyways, you can see I killed about 6 of my opponent's Saurus Warriors. In return, my opponent only managed to kill about 3 of my feral orcs in return. My opponent, I think, challenged? No, I don't know what I'm talking about. No, my opponent wiped out my VSB. So that one unpainted figure in front that is holding a spear, that is the model that I'm using for my BSB. So my general did throw all his attacks into my BSB and did kill my BSB, as well as killed 3 of my feral orcs. However, I killed more than my opponent. It wasn't an auto break, but my opponent was down by 5 or 6 and broke, and I, being frenzied, had to give chase and chase them down. So that is how the game ends. So it was we didn't calculate points, but I tabled my opponent, so it was probably like a 17-3 or something. The secondary objective was get into your opponent's deployment zone, which this unit is in my opponent's deployment zone. So it was like, yeah, it was probably 17-3 or something, 18-2, 19-1, I don't know. I count it as I won, as my opponent had nothing else on the table, so I count that as a victory. My general was still alive, so, we can always get more goblins. So this was a really fun battle. I really did enjoy it. I wish my chariot would have gotten in combat sooner. Because I placed first, I put it on the far side, and my opponent, of course, we deployed on the opposite side of the board, so it really had the longest way to go. But I think chariots should be able to do something other than just move normally. Maybe I'm playing that wrong, but it does say they can't march. So as far as I was playing it, moved 7 at each turn, which is very slow for a chariot, in my opinion. But what can you do? Other than that, the game was really fun. I don't have a slide that says MVP, but my MVP would probably, I guess, be my Feral Orcs. They wiped out the rest of the Saurian Warriors, so they did pretty good. Although I could do my Head Bashers because they wiped out the other unit too, although this unit did help as well. So I'm not sure if there's an MVP for this game, because my Spider also took out this Stegodon. So it's more of a group effort, It's one of those rare times when Orcs actually work together to do something, so it worked out pretty well for me. Yeah, so this is going to be the last battle with my Orcs for a while. I'm going to switch it up and switch to my Empire army, which is where I'm invading Lustria. So I'm still working on the campaign with my friend here to work it out, but we're thinking that the first battle would be actually a very large battle. We're thinking probably 3,000 points or so. So it'll probably be a big long video when it comes up, but we want to make it. I want to make it more than just just a 3,000 point army. I don't know if you guys. I don't know. You guys might be gamers probably as much as I am. So I don't know if you guys have those little boats that you got. I think they were made by WizKids. You punch them out and then put them together, and then you have these little pirate ships. So I think we're gonna do an invasion force. Well, I have 3,000 points, and my opponent has probably maybe half that or something, and is defending the beach. And so my troops arrive as the boats arrive. So I don't get all my troops at the beginning, so they kind of come on gradually. So we may be playing something like that. So we'll see how it goes. I'm still working on it. If you guys have any suggestions or any ideas, you can put those in the comment section below. If you saw any mistakes in this video, please also put those in the comment section below. And if you have any other comments or suggestions, please also put those in the comment section below. Other than that, if you guys could hit like and subscribe, and as always, game on.